you do no one a favor, especially God, when you're not honest with your feelings. Like if Jesus had the confidence to weep over Lazarus dying, like let's just think about that. Homeboy is gonna save the man, like he's gonna resurrect this man, like he knows what's coming, and yet he had the confidence and the trust to weep. You do no one favors. No one, not yourself, not God, not the people assigned to your creativity and your gift and your purpose, not your family, not those around you. You do no one favors when you deny or avoid your feelings.
Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, this has been one of the most long time coming encores you might ever hear or see, but it's worth it. If you can wait a year and a half for Game of Thrones and you can wait for the Star Wars prequels, then you can wait for the encore of Melissa Vargas coming back on the show. But she has so much to share. Melissa, welcome back to the God and Gig Show. How are you?
I am so good. I am so happy to be back. And somebody wants to make a cameo. So let's see if we can make this happen.
Oh my God. Wait, this is the first. Oh my gosh. Look. Okay.
Her name is Samba.
Her name, oh my gosh.
Is Samba. Her name should be Shadow because she did not want to leave me alone. And so
okay, yes. So we have our first three. She's going to be interviewed too. Samba's going to explain how I can get around Colombia and find all the nicest bones.
Yes. Yes.
Very cool. But yes, this is really, I've been actually pursuing this, as you know, this interview to come back for a while because seeing you, even though we were not able to stay connected directly throughout your transitions and things like that, I was following you like a hawk on social media. And so when I saw the transition, so we're going to have to give everybody kind of like the rewind. They can go back to the original interview, but you know the drill, the 30-second elevator pitch, just so people who are listening for the first time, who didn't hear our first interview, just give them a little bit of what you do and, you know, the one thing that you want them to remember about you if they didn't catch anything else.
Ooh, that last part was a little off guard. So things have happened, but I am an overall communicator, strategist, writer, poet, content creator. There's a lot of things. Creative artist, let's go. Let's call it one thing. I was born in New York. I am now living in Colombia as of March of 2024. God sent me. We can talk about that. One thing that I want people to know me by or remember me by.
Just remember, yeah, like when you know how you do the 30-second pitch, and then you know, just people are like, okay, that, and then there's like there's the one thing that, oh, that's the lady that blank.
That blank.
Right.
One of the things that I'm really, really passionate about is artists accepting their artist identity and walking in boldness in what God has called them to do, trusting that God has their path designed specifically for them.
And this is why we needed the encore, because we cannot be reminded about that enough. But yes, you mentioned so many new things in 4 years since we've been 5 years. Wow. Since we've
my
been
life has changed. We are not, I'm not in the same continent. Let's start with that.
Exactly. It's connection, same connection, different continent. So
seriously,
I have to take you back to a little bit before that transition. We were talking back before in COVID and others. We were really going on. I believe the theme was, and it's so funny that's fresh now, even though it was 4 years ago. I really remember us talking so deeply about the artist and how you handle life's changes and ups and downs. I remember you talking about your original position at Univision and having to deal with all the back and forth with that. Now you got a whole nother set of back and forth. But I guess the first question would be, is how did your career move forward in that post-COVID area? You know what I mean? The pandemic area, because a lot of us we got hit, things went crazy, and then it was like, okay, back to life. So what was your
one
transition?
Day to the next.
Yeah. So what was your transition, you know, back into what some people might call normal as an artist? Like, did you find a new kind of groove after all that went out?
So, okay, let me try to summarize this as quickly as possible. So what was interesting was 2021 was still kind of COVID, right? So, and I was still trying to be an entrepreneur and have an agency and build clients. And I remember by 2022, nothing was happening. And so there were a lot of interesting conversations with God because I didn't want a job. But by 2022, I was like, all right, let me get a job. I remember 2022, I actually no, let me rectify that. 2022 was still a year I was looking for clients and I got some clients. And I remember by the end of 2022, I was like, I don't like working with clients, telling God, just complaining. And I was like, just because I'm like, I can't handle you. And I think one of the things I'm really going to say about this, and I want to put this out here first, if you jump out at any point, one of the most important things about understanding your identity, your God-given identity, the way he fashioned you, is that if you're willing to accept that, you're going to have less bumps in the road and you're going to find your groove way faster. The problem is we think we know better than God. And let's just be clear, we don't. Like just make peace with that realization and then walk from that, right? So he goes, okay, cool. You don't want clients. What do you want to do? I said, I want to create content. I want to write. Like, I'm a writer. He goes, great. I never asked you to create an agency. So I'm glad we're on the same page now. And I'm like, oh, listen, sir, we didn't need all that. Okay. You didn't need to.
I love hearing people's prayer lives acted out like this because everybody has a different name for God. And for you to
I
go,
call them different things.
Sir,
no,
the sir, I love the sir. Like, I love
at that moment, I needed a sir because what on earth? So then I was like, all right, cool. So then I ended up accepting a job in 2023, beginning of 2023. And I was there for 7 months. And can I just say, the hurt people in the workplace had not happened to me so evidently as in this job because my boss was young. My boss was not a creative director, being a creative director. She was thrusted into a position and she's 20 something and I'm 30 something. And I'm being brought in under her to do other things that she knows nothing about. And when I say my anxiety was through the roof by the time I got fired, I cannot explain to you. The best way I can explain it to you is this. The friend that got me the job, I talked to her and I was like, man, I just wasn't feeling peace. And I just kind of felt like the time is ending, but if I lose this job, what am I doing? That kind of thing. And I remember the week after they fired me, she went to crew. We went to a small group, which I was a leader of. And she goes, Mel, your expression changed. Like you're at peace. And I was like, if she can see it, what was going on in my heart and in my mind and in my soul that I was not paying attention to? And so I'm not going to be responsible. So I'm not going to go wherever my mind was going to go. But I think that was really important. And then after that, I got a couple of other clients, but then nothing was solidifying. And here's where I went to the identity thing before. As I'm losing my job and as I'm kind of getting clients, but finances are really getting tough, the underlying conversation that God is having with me, this is December. And since September, God is like, I need you to drop your business and trust that I will provide. And as someone who had not learned to trust God at that level, and mind you, I live by myself. I have no roommates. My parents are in Colombia. Like I'm by myself. And having had the upbringing that I had, I only knew how to provide for myself. I am someone who worked since the age of 16 because she had to.
Yeah.
So I was not prepared to say, okay, God, give me my daily bread. My system was all like, fire alarm. What is happening? We need money. We need to go. So I couldn't be at peace and trust them to provide. However, end of February comes of 2024 and my cousin calls me and she sends me a text and she goes, sometimes God will close doors so that we'll walk through the one that he wants us to walk through.
Yep.
And the conversation about moving to Colombia kept coming in since the pandemic. But I was always hesitant because I have a very strange relationship with my mom, with my family, because they're very Latino. They're very in your business. The day of the funeral, they're like, "Oh, this is how you should dress all the time. You shouldn't wear jeans." I'm like, Thank God I have a slow reaction time, because I thought about it 2 days later and I'm like, I'm in a funeral and you're telling me how to dress.
Oh
Like, this does not
gosh.
make sense.
Yeah.
And God is good in the way that He's teaching me to like just let things go. But I just always felt very alarmed by the way that they were. And I'm like, I don't feel like having going to the same city to just be in conflict with them. However, end of February 2024 comes and I have $20 in my bank account and there's nothing coming. And I haven't paid rent and I haven't paid bills and I haven't paid anything. And that my cousin sends me a text message, one of my cousins, on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I get a call from my other cousin. He goes, things are not as bad here. You should come. Thursday, let me give you the chronologies of how crazy God is.
Wow. Because
Wednesday night, we have what we call crew catch up. I used to go to VU in Miami. So we had what we call crew catch up, which is in the middle of the season, we would gather all the crew leaders, all the small group leaders, and just talk about what the season was like. And that night's theme is the garden. And what Pastor Adrian says is we call it the garden because we believe people should get their flowers where they're alive to smell them. I think it's the way the phrase goes. And I have been a leader for 2 years at this point, and that is the night that they give me and my co-leader our flowers. The next day at 3 p.m., I am deciding to leave my apartment, leave Miami, close everything up, and move to Colombia. The way I sobbed that night was insane because of the timing, because God was like, let me make sure that you know you're loved and that I'm sending you in love. I moved to Colombia March 13th, and here's where I'll end my chronology. In April, I had been following an agency, a PR agency, for months. We're talking about 6 months before. They're from Miami. They had never had an opening, a job opening. April comes around and they have a first opening that they post on social. And I message them. And I send them my resume, but they never see it. In May, end of May, they post another opening. I message them again. They finally get my resume and my portfolio. That's Thursday of that week. Tuesday of the next week at 2:30, I'm having an interview with them. Wednesday at 6 p.m., I'm getting an offer for my job. That's where I currently work right now.
Wow.
Why would God give me a job with a Miami agency the moment I moved to Colombia? And I would argue that it was obedience, because there's nothing else. Nothing had changed in my resume.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to ask you, was that step of faith. Again, I believe that God sometimes whispers and then sometimes God uses the storm, right? Either way, he still speaks.
And it's still love. Let me just make sure that we know this.
Yeah.
It is still love.
Exactly. It is not that God is punishing you by creating these situations that make you kind of realize, all right, it's time to listen. Israelites went through the plagues just like the Egyptians did, right? They just weren't burned. They weren't stung, all this. But the same thing that covered everybody went over them. They had to prepare. They had to do all the things. And so they weren't protected. They were protected from the storm, but they weren't protected like from the actual existence of the storm. They had to go through it. So my question is, when you get to that moment, when you arrive in Colombia, when you say, okay, God, I trusted you, then now what? Were there any moments? Because every creator that's listening I had that moment twice, leaving my job from my teaching position to go full-time homeschool dad, part-time worship musician, and then leaving my church back then, from full-time worship musician to part-time whatever I thought it was going to be, right? So each time I'm like, okay, I'm obedient. And then there's that, okay, God.
In between.
Now what? So how did you experience those couple of weeks, days, hours after you follow God? You move it, you make the move. So talk to anyone that's kind of like at that moment of where, they might do the second guessing, and like how to get through that second guessing or that moment of silence right before God moves.
I think the way I handled it, I was mad and I cried. Okay, let me just make sure that because here's the thing, like, you do no one a favor, especially God, when you're not honest with your feelings.
Yes.
Like, if Jesus had the confidence to weep over Lazarus dying, like, let's just think about that. Homeboy is gonna save the man. Like, he's gonna resurrect this man. Like, he knows what's coming. And yet he had the confidence and the trust to weep. You do no one favors. No one. Not yourself, not God, not the people assigned to your creativity and your gift and your purpose. Not your family, not those around you. You do no one favors when you deny or avoid your feelings. Feeling avoider, but I was mad, I was sad, I was confused, I was afraid. I really didn't want to come and be in that close proximity to my family. I love them, but I have had a really hard time accepting and loving who I am because it is so different from who they think I should be. And they're not Christians, they're not believers. So I can't have conversations. Even in these past 2 weeks, my mom was like, the next day, she was like, oh, let's talk about, changing the title of the apartment to just your name. And I was like, I don't have the bandwidth for you. You guys handle it.
Let's make sure because you mentioned the last 2 weeks, and I know now as you've opened that door, I just feel you want to talk about confidence. I guess we should let people know in the last 2 weeks. I mean, us having this interview is honestly like touching my heart because of the loss that you suffered. So
my dad passed away 2 weeks ago, and it's not something that I'm avoiding. It's just for context. My dad and I had a bit of a strange relationship, so I'll tell you this much. Talk about that transition period. Yeah. I remember asking God, I said, if you're going to take me, I need you to tell me why. You're not just taking me to keep me in Colombia. Like, that's not what you're doing. We're not going backwards. Like, let me just, sir, I hope you understand. And I said, I need you to tell me. He goes, you're going to go to say goodbye to your dad. Talk about a loving father that will prepare you. See, this is where it says, in the world you will have troubles, but I have overcome the world. I'm paraphrasing, I'm butchering, I'm sorry.
No, you got them. But the meaning is right there.
But I felt his love in saying, this is coming, and it's inevitable. And what's interesting is, here's where God is very intentional. I have a half sister on my dad's side. She's also Christian, but my dad is not. We are first generations on both sides. I'm first generation on both sides. And when I called her to give her the news, because my cousin called me, my dad's niece called me, I said, I want to call my sister because I knew we would have a different conversation. When I called her, she goes, God had already told me I was not going to say goodbye to my dad. So what a loving father to take both of us through the journey and prepare us for what was to come. Mind you, I got that March 2024. And I think that gave me purpose. Like, that started to shift it for me because it meant I was on a mission. And it always felt like you're going on a mission, you're going on a mission, you're going on a mission. This isn't God thrusting you into Colombia and that's it. It's just you're there to do some things. And I also, if you're not familiar, something that I would recommend as an incredible resource is called Soul Care. It's a book, but there's also small groups related to it. And it's a 7-step healing process of the soul.
Okay.
One of the chapters is the families and, generational curses, generational patterns, what are some things? And I remember I was very hesitant in that chapter because I'm like, if I call my aunt to ask her about like what we were like, she's not going to tell me. They don't think about like, oh, but so-and-so was unfaithful. And so that like,
they're not making those connections for you.
They're not making those connections.
Right.
And they're also like when it comes to my grandparents, they're very much like on my mom's side. They're like, oh, they were perfect. You can't say anything about them. So we're not critical of people in a way to heal. They're just critical of the younglings because they're like, we're adults. You should almost like not worship us, but venerate us.
Yeah, a little bit of a pedestal.
Yeah, because we're the adults. And so I also understood that God was like, well, you don't want to make the call. I'm going to send you over there so you can get all the juicy details so you can heal. Like, I got to see we're liars, we're selfish, we're prideful, the way we talk to each other. Like, there's just all these little things. So that for me was like, okay, I'm going on a mission. And I remember the first therapist I ever talked to him about, because we think of mission as like, what's my life's mission? She goes, you got to think of missions as like military assignments. You get a letter, you get a start date, you get an end date, and that's it. Like, this isn't your life's work.
That's great.
This is an assignment.
Yes.
And so I said, cool, Colombia is an assignment. I can trust that I have a start date. I don't know my end date, but God does. So that really helped me. However, when I got here, I went into my mom's apartment for a month and plus, and I was like, I couldn't pray. I was like screaming off the top of my lungs inside. I was like, God, I need to go. It was super humid. There is no AC in there. The window barely like gives in air. We were all going
Oh my
insane.
gosh.
But I kind of said, I don't know what was the thing that's keeping me in peace, but I just was like, but I'm here. You got me? Like,
Yeah. I mean, the very first,
and it's not permanent.
And as soon as you said, number one, I love the picture of the assignment, because to all of us, especially, and what you're describing right now, I'm going like three different directions at the same time. What you're describing right now is what I'm starting more and more to call and borrow from other people who named it the portfolio life, because you have this portfolio of both experiences and expertise. You have the experiences of what you've gone through with God. You got the expertise of all the different things you do. And it's like, how does this portfolio equal like a life that I can like make something out of? And it's amazing. It's okay. She's wanting to start. Have our co-host.
Exactly. But here's the other part that's even more important. Yeah. Is that as artists, we tend to make our identity whatever it is that we do.
Yes.
And that is always going to change. And unless we make our identity that we are a child of God, provided with so many gifts that can be introduced and used and employed in different seasons, in different ways, in different forms, if we don't have that outlook, we'll always be frustrated when life changes, when their life changes.
And that's exactly what I feel I can speak of, you can speak of. And I'm just hoping the listeners and the watchers really get this understanding that this is not, like you said before, it's not a punishment when things go what seemingly off the rails in your life period. Because that's the thing, the other part of portfolio that I really like is that it's not just one section of the book. Right? It's not just your photography. It's not just your music. It's not just your writing. It's like, it's the whole thing. And then just the bad parts or just the good parts, same deal. He works together all for our good. And so knowing that all is part of it, I'd love to hear from you. But yeah, I want you to go ahead, because that's where I'm at. Like, I'm hearing how he put all these in the cauldron.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about it this way. If you, I don't know why, but this is the illustration I'm getting right now.
Sure.
Let's call it as the Holy Spirit illustration. If we think of our lives as a lighthouse, right? We need to be built, right? And we need the bricks, and we need the cement, and we need, the paint and all the things. And that's what life should look like. And unless we allow all the different seasons to build all the different floors and all the different heights, we'll never get to be a lighthouse. And we need to stop making life about us and what happens to us. One of the things that I understood many years ago was, if I am to have a message for others, then the things that happen to me are happening to me so that I have something to say to others.
Yes.
You think I'm the only one that has had a dad who lived with addiction for 40 years who passed away? How many people are hopeless right now living through that? How many people are living with guilt for the daughters and sons that they weren't when those parents were alive? How many people wish they saved people? The biggest thing that I can learn from my dad passing away is that I am no one's savior, and that I have to make peace with the fact that the savior is Jesus. It's not me. I remember telling my sister, because she was like, I feel very guilty. I feel like I didn't call him enough. And I said, you and I could have called him every day, could have talked to him about Jesus every day, could have prayed and fasted and pleaded with God for him, and he still would have been saved. And maybe we would have never had a different relationship, and he still would have just wanted money from us, which is what my dad wanted, because that's what addiction does. It changes you.
Yeah.
I'm not living this because I'm a victim and God somehow forsook me. Like he's here with me, and he's given me the strength to live through this experience because I know that somebody else is going to need it. And as an artist, the things I go through are meant to be displayed through my art so others can be healed. But I need to take myself out of the center of my own life in order for that to happen.
Yeah.
And then as an artist, most of us don't do that.
Very true. We have that main character syndrome, I've heard it called, where everything does revolve around you. And I want you to speak to this because this is so touching. Number one, I love your bravery and I so appreciate your bravery and your courage of saying this so clearly. Again, I know this is emotional labor. I have a whole blog post on emotional labor that artists go through, or everybody goes through, every human being goes through, but especially those of us who have to kind of like wrestle with this and also have this other part of us that's like expressive anyway. But now you have the expressive of what I want to say and the expressive of what I have to say, which is not fun. So what you're doing is the second one, which I so appreciate. But I want you to go to a little bit of what I was thinking of was how much in terms of the things that you're going through right now.
Yeah.
Seeing how you are able to do that emotional work and then talk to the person who maybe, this is what I find out people kind of think, like you said, putting yourself in the center of it. They think the only way that God speaks through them or to them is through pain. They feel like I have to suffer more. Right. And that's the problem I feel with, like you said, the main character thing where it's like, oh, it's all about me. It's all about me. So if I'm going through it, it's because God has to teach me something or teach me a lesson. Or even for artists, unfortunately, we see artists who literally drink themselves to death or literally go to the drugs because they're like, this is how I express out of my pain and my anguish. Right. Can you speak a little bit to that to make sure that we have the balance? Because obviously the pain is part of it, but it shouldn't be, like you said, your identity. I feel that's one of the...
It's not, well, first of all, it's not your identity. And second of all, joy is a fruit of the spirit.
Yes.
It's not pain. It's not suffering. It's joy. So if you are not finding joy in the midst of pain, then you are not like your main character energy right now. Because I remember it is night one of the funeral and I'm going to dinner with my friends and I'm laughing. And I'm not laughing because I'm avoiding what's happening. Mind you, I'm also not great at emotional processing. Welcome to neurodivergence. But I'm laughing because that's who my father is. And second, that's what my father taught me, right? So my dad was a very joyous, jolly person, my earthly father. And that's something that we would share. And I would make him laugh. And he would be like, you're hilarious. And I know that was... I think one of the things about my earthly father was he had this magnetic personality. Like he just made everybody just gravitated towards him. And part of it was the joy. Part of it was the laughter. Part of it was he knew how to entertain and make people laugh. And in this very short process of 4 days, which was the time between him being in the hospital and passing away, I think God was very quick to be like, hey, but you know that you're also your dad's daughter. And like, there's things about you that are from him. And so one of the things that I could recognize was the joy. Pain is never a teacher. Like, I'm going to make this controversial statement. Pain is never the teacher. Joy is never the teacher. God, Jesus through it all, is always the great friend next to you, the great mentor in the middle of it all. We make pain, we make joy, we make happiness, we make love, we make all the feelings the ones to speak to us, but Jesus is the one in the middle of everything. I am not happy because he passed away and he left. I am just understanding that it is part of life. It was something to happen, and God in his love was preparing me for it. Like, there were times, so the last time we spoke was May of last year. And so that people understand, part of what was my struggle was I didn't know how to handle him wanting to ask me for money and me not knowing what that money was for. And he tried to separate me and get me to stop talking to my sister. So I was like, these are things that are too... I'm very black and white, and I'm learning that God is teaching me the grays of humanity. But I'm very like my brain, the way life taught me, I was very black and white. So for me, I was like, God, I don't know how to handle this. And I remember asking God a few times, I'm like, I don't feel like calling my dad because I don't know how to handle this. But if you tell me, I will do it. Right. And it was almost me asking him, like, give me the strength to want to have a relationship with him and not give in to the black and white. But it just never happened. But I remember there were a few times where I felt like one day I'm going to get the call that my dad is either in the hospital or passed away. Like, one day I'm going to and I just understood it. I understand now And the way I see it, because it's my perspective, is that God was in his love preparing me to be strong for this. And so because I feel like God was walking me through this, because I don't feel alone in it, I'm able to have peace in it. And I think we are so focused on, am I in pain? Am I in love? Can I be happy in this? Like, we're looking to define our emotions, and we're looking to define the moment, and we're missing the picture of it all, which is in the midst of everything, Jesus is there. I'm going to give you an example that I think some videographers will love. I remember this because I love how God speaks to me. I just think it's hilarious. There's a lot of talk about Peter and Peter walking on water, right?
Right.
And a lot of preachers are like, oh, but he looked at the waves and he got worried and so he started drowning. I hate that perspective. It pisses me off because I'm like, hello, welcome to life. Yeah. Like, what do you always expect from Peter? Like, right. If Jesus wept,
how would you do? How would you do?
Right. Yeah. If Jesus wept, how do you expect Peter not to look at the waves? Mm-hmm. So God goes, okay, put that story in a set, in a TV set. And I said, okay, cool. It goes, it's a one camera shot, right? So the way I see it is the boat, Peter, and Jesus, right? And the camera's right here. So he goes, okay, cool. Every preacher has, because you have a one camera, you can pan, which this is what it is.
Right.
And then zoom is in and out. Right, cool. So he goes, pan to Peter. And I said, okay, cool. Well, that's what everybody does. Great. Just one shot, everybody's looking at Peter. They're not looking at the boat. They're not looking at Jesus, just at Peter. And okay, cool. He looks at the waves and whatever. He goes, okay, pan to Jesus. What happened? What he was asking me to do is, what is Jesus doing as Peter is worrying? And he goes, Jesus never takes his eyes off of Peter. It doesn't matter what Peter is doing. Like, your worrying is not moving God's eyes off of you. His eyes are always on you, regardless of how you worry. And he's not worried about you being worried. Like, that doesn't faze him. Yeah. Like, God isn't here like, oh, here he goes again. Here she goes again. Did I not teach him? Like, no. Okay, cool. That was day one. And I was like, oh, Jesus never took his eyes off of me. That's great. And then he goes, okay, pan all the way back to the boat, right? So you don't see Peter, you don't see Jesus, you only see the boat. And he gave me this picture of the apostles being like, what? Did you hear? Look at Peter. He just walked on water. I would never do that. That's crazy. This man is insane. And it was this lesson of like, it doesn't matter how many times you fall. You've already taken the stuff off the boat, which so many people are unwilling to do. But you need both perspectives at the same time. Yeah. If I'm going to walk on water, which is what an artist does, it's the impossible. It's we step into the unknown. We step into the new ground, right? We get to have the essence of Genesis 1. Like, the first thing that we know about Jesus is that he creates, God. But,
yes, but yeah, exactly. His voice, no, absolutely.
Right.
In the beginning was the word, yeah.
In the beginning was the word, but the first thing you hear him is create through his speech, through his language, through words. The story is not, oh, he sat here with some clay and he just started building leaves. Like, that's not the story. But that's the first thing we do. But if we're going to do that, we need to have the perspective that God never takes his eyes off of us, no matter what we go through. So it's okay. Like, mind you, I'm going to say this. Feel the fear. Feel the sadness. 100%. Feel the happiness. Feel all the things, with the understanding and the perspective that he never takes his eyes off of you, and that there's a whole group of people that are watching you step into the unknown and say, oh, I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
And I think that gives us a healthy perspective, because it takes our eyes off of us.
Yes.
And it gives us the fuel to keep going. But your emotion we are not our emotions. Our emotions are meant to be a connecting path with God. There are times that we feel sadness as artists because of the environment around us. There are times that we feel sadness so that we can empathize and have compassion for others. There are times that we feel pain because the world is full of pain. But if you succumb to the emotion, thinking that that's who you are and how you are and that's your fuel, that's when you give the enemy power.
100%.
Because then you become a tool for him.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's very quick.
Well, I think that's where it's funny. We're talking about in a very roundabout way. Your father's addiction was clearly something that you had to deal with, but artists and us as people, period, we could become addicted to that same kind of whether it's control, wanting to have the control, wanting to control other people's opinions. Like you mentioned, the people in the boat. Some of us look back at the boat. It could be social media. It could be whatever we care about.
It could be food.
Think. Right. Oh, it could be anything. Like all these different things that are like coping mechanisms to not keep, like you said, Jesus having his eyes on us. But I love that analogy and seeing both sides of that, realizing that, number one, we as artists and creatives do have, Jesus called us out, right? So I'm going to continue your analogy because I love it so much. Jesus calling Peter out and saying, come, Peter being willing is like us putting that first demo tape out, right? It's like us putting that first song or that first artistic piece and like sending it in for the gallery. It's like, come. And you don't know what that first, let's go to Peter again. We don't talk about Peter's first step. We know he sank, but
he took the first step.
If you take that first step and realize that you're not going to drown, how many steps would you take? And yes, we're all literally my verse today, Melissa, as I was reading today was in Psalm 37, where it says, it's talking about the righteous is forsaken. But then right before the one he says, I've never seen the righteous forsaken, it says, though he fall, he will not be utterly cast down. God knows we are going to take the falls. And he still says, come. So I think I love what about your story is about stepping out in faith, going to Colombia and not immediately having the angels appear and the job is waiting for you the second you step off the plane, right? I think that's what a lot of us get into, like that worship of the blessing is we expect, okay, I was obedient. Here we go. Versus Jericho, we walk around it 7 times and we gotta wait.
But let me tell you the craziest part about my job so that you understand how good God is. So one of the things that I did as I was coming here, I said, okay, God, I'm here. Now I'm really dropping marketing, right? Like I have been doing marketing, but I'm dropping it. I was even going down the route of like maybe teaching Spanish and English, right? Because there's a lot of tourists here where I live. It's not Medellin. If people are looking for it, it's not Medellin. Medellin is expensive. I live in a very small version of Medellin called Pereira, which is right in the coffee region. So this is why this is accompanying me right now.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. You're making me a little jealous because I have my Ethiopian coffee over here. We have our beans sent from all over the place. But clearly you're getting the literally right.
Seriously. And so I was like, all right, maybe and this is what I was looking at. And I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, okay, great. The best part is that I don't have to earn as much living here. I don't have to pay rent. There's like a bunch of like benefits. So I was like, I don't have to worry about like making so much money. I'm like, okay, cool. When I get this job is a publicist job and it's a lot of writing. I'm a writer. And I was very nervous because in my past job, I had gotten so many red marks, like, the edits about my writing and like, you need to do this, you need to do that. So I was really nervous in the first few weeks. And then I started getting the hang of it. And then I get the first, like, this is great. We love it. And my boss automatically was like, you're such a great storyteller. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, I'm getting validated in all the ways that I know I needed. And then we start getting into strategy sessions and she's like, oh, you're really good. And then I remember the first time she goes, I need you to do these key points for a client. So like kind of telling them kind of what to answer for a Q&A and stuff like that. And the client's really happy. And then we go into a media training and she's like, you're doing great, And then I'm like, how do I end up in a job that I love? My bosses are divine. They're heaven sent. Like they're the nicest humans ever. And I'm getting to display what God has brought me through for the past 20 years in yesterday we had a whole day with a client and I'm the only one that's offsite. And at the end of the day, they're like, just thank you. Like you just brought it home and like for bringing it. And I was like, I'm out of words. Like I don't know how to thank God enough.
The writer is at a loss for words. I love it.
Seriously, because I'm just like, it baffles me that it's this good because of all the things that I've been through before. But had I not been through that and accepted the leaving the marketing and accepted, and because it was also a conversation sometimes with God of like, you're a writer, just live that out, enjoy it, accept it, embrace it, celebrate it. And for it to be celebrated in a workplace, which I feel like had not happened before, it feels baffling for me. But there needed to be a surrendered a surrender of like, I don't know what's best for me, and a surrender of honesty of God. This is who I want to be. This is what I want to do. And I told them, I said, if you're sending me to Colombia, like, we're focusing on writing. He goes, that's exactly what I want you to do. So for it to be my job, and for me to be compensated, and for it to be validated and seen and appreciated, there was a lot of ego and the old Millie that needed to die in order for that to happen. And so the reality is that the dream is on the other side of us dying to ourselves, in a way.
Yeah.
And learn that it's okay that it doesn't make sense for the world. We were not created to make sense to the world, because we cannot influence what we're a part of. And I'm saying this to myself because I hate the word pioneer, and I hear it in my life quite a few times, and I just heard it recently. But we cannot fit in and influence. And if you look at Brené Brown, fitting in and belonging are two very different things.
Oh no, I literally just read Daring Greatly. You're right on it. Yeah.
And so it's square peg, round hole.
Yeah.
But we still fit in the box. Right?
Yeah.
So because we're not trying to, we're still part of the box. We're still one of the pieces.
But if you make yourself, here's the interesting thing. The only way, and this is why we because we go on these things, the only way a square peg fits in a round hole is if you shrink it.
Right. And so a lot of us are shrinking to what's normal, to what makes sense, making art for it to fit. Like, here's something that God told me in the beginning of this year.
Okay.
Because for people to, so people understand, I'm very half and half. Like, I'm strategist and creative. You would think that's great because, you got everything that you need. No, because you sabotage yourself a lot. And I remember at the beginning, and I one of the struggles that I have, I'm like, okay, I'm going to write. Do I have a Substack? Do I create my website? Do I write on Medium? Like, where do I go? And I'm like, and here's something that I was, another big update is, I'm doing BSSM, Bethel's School of Supernatural Ministry.
Okay.
If you're not ready. Like, people are ready.
We have so many. One of my two or three of our dearest friends from our church either graduated from there or are currently going. And so for people that love it. Right. For people that don't know, it's a school to take your eyes off of earth and into heaven. That's the best way I can put it. It is literally looking at God and the relationship with God and who he is as a father and everything else in a completely different way. But I was like, okay, I'm going to write, but then, why are I bringing that up? Oh, what am I doing? Right? Like, I want to write, but like, where am I? Was it actually, what was the actual like practical
Right.
direction?
And then this week I remember hearing like, we start the relationship off with God, tell me what to do. Right. And that's kind of like the obedience part of our starting off, but then it goes into relationship. And then your conversation should go from tell me what to do to like the heart behind what you're asking me to do. Right.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, does it really matter if I have a blog or put it on Substack? God's going to do what God's going to do.
Yes.
But then the strategist is fighting for the strategy, and the daughter needs to start taking hold of the strategist and saying like, hey, we're just going to obey. And that's where I'm at. But
sounds like a mind to heart thing. Like the heart.
Absolutely.
God is speaking to the heart. Your mind is like, I have to have it in this particular package. And God's like,
no. And also let's just be honest. It's an immaturity in my relationship with God, because the reality is if I trust him, okay, let me go here. Matthew 11:28-30 is my favorite verse in the Message. But in the Message, one of the things that he clearly says is, walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. When I read that, God was like, I'm also a strategist. Did you know? So can you trust that when I ask you to do something, I have a strategy and I don't have to tell you. You can just trust me. Because faith is the way I see faith, and I've been seeing it for a while this way. It's almost like a thick mist. And so all God is going to show you is step one. Can you obey me to take step one so that I can clear step two? I'm not going to clear the first 5. Because if I clear the first 5, you're going to get to see 6 to 10, and you're going to see the tumultuous craziness that's coming.
And you're
not going to take
turn
step
around.
1.
Yeah.
not going to take step one. I'm just going to show you step one. Can you trust me? Can you trust my goodness? Can you trust my love? Can you trust that I got you? And even if you fall, I can heal you. I can cure you. I can support you. Like, I got you. So at the beginning of the year, I was like, God, what do I do? And he goes, would you still obey me in writing if no one ever read it and it was only for me? I was like, the strategist is not happy. Just letting you know that. And so, but it was this feeling of like, I want you to put it out there. I just don't want you to worry about where people are going to find it because I can take them there. Like,
it's the seed, and he's the Lord of the harvest. Like, the seed is the writing, and you just keep sowing, and let God take care of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so for me, mind you, this was like January 4th. So it was right before my dad went into the hospital. So I'm kind of like trying to come back to all the things God and I had spoken about, like that first week, to like act up. So yeah, so the Substack is coming, the podcast is coming, it's all coming in like the next week. But by the time this is out, my stuff might be out.
Yes, well, no, don't worry. We'll have all the links to all the things, all the mail things. But here's what I want to make sure before I forget, because otherwise, because this question, like when you hit it, I was like, oh gosh, this is what I want to know. Because you mentioned like the dreams. Even right now, you're talking about like how God was speaking, and then you went through this season. Right. But part of what I would love, and I think another listener would think or ask is, okay, and by the way, I'm speaking to myself here. Once you pass a particular test, there is always the next one that you're like, okay, God, I've solved this. I got this. I made the move to Colombia. I did. So is this a place where you're like, Lord, I'm also looking forward to the next? Or are you in a place where it's like, let me just trust him right here, and I'm not even, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying not to dream, but I'm just wondering like where your mindset is. Is it like, no more tests, let's just handle this?
Well, that's impossible.
Okay.
That's.
But you know what I mean? Like you're not that you can't go to another or won't, but it's like, yeah, let's just chill on. Let's just handle this dream.
I want to chill, but there was something that happened with my mom's family on Thanksgiving. And I'm coming out of that, and then my dad. So I'm like, all right, but it's funny because I think I hadn't seen them as tests until you mentioned it as tests, because I was just looking at like, this is just the next thing and the next thing. I think if we look at life's happening as tests, or if we look at life happening as lessons, and then we try to create the peak and troughs of it, we're going to be completely disappointed because they may not happen when we want them to happen.
Yeah.
I'm at a place where like, I'm so focused on my closeness with God, and I'm so focused on my own healing that I'm just taking it kind of day by day.
Okay.
I'm excited about the podcast. I'm excited about the Substack. I'm excited to like, it is going to be kind of nerve-wracking because if I'm writing, if I'm giving it my all, you're getting my all. Like, I'm telling you about my dad, and I'm telling you about the nitty-gritty, and I'm telling you about the things that I don't know. And, God's going to have to reel me in on some wisdom thing and be like, maybe that stuff you don't need to say. Because I am that transparent and open. And I think it comes from, as a child, there's so much that was withheld that I'm like, this is not for me. But I think I'm not, like, when I came here, I was like, all right, I'm done. Like, you need to leave me alone for a few months. But I am also, I understand that saying yes to him means, again, dying to yourself.
Yeah.
I can only focus on my perspective on what's happening. I can't focus on what's happening because, for the most part, I don't have control.
That's good. Yeah.
And I gave up my control. But I get to, something that's been coming up a lot for me is I'm a natural born leader. And I say this in humility, and I also say this in recognition of what he has given me and understanding that it's not for me.
Yeah.
It's not for me to take the glory. But if I don't believe that I'm a leader, I'm always going to reject the times where he allows me to lead.
Yeah.
Right? I recognize my gifts. ¿Quieres decir algo? She's like, I'm done. I recognize my gifts because, and I'm learning to do that. It's not natural for me, but I'm learning to do that because then I can say yes to God. when I hear him calling.
100%.
So but something that's been coming up a lot is you need to learn to lead yourself in order to lead others. And so for me is, okay, God, then I need to learn to lead myself. I don't feel, señorita, gracias, ven acá. She's
So
like,
for those who are listening, was it Samba?
Yes.
Samba is absolutely going to make sure she gets camera time, so that's why you're hearing the pauses.
She wants my attention. She's like, why are you?
No more garden gigs, no more podcast listeners.
Exactly.
It's Samba time.
Yes, she's a Shih Tzu, by the way, for those listening. And she's a very demanding and spoiled Shih Tzu, and I am aware that I've spoiled her. So, learning to lead myself is kind of important, and that's something that artists, we need to do. We need to learn to say, hey, I'm going to be sad in this moment, but I'm giving myself 5 minutes because I have my kids coming up from school and they don't deserve a sad mom because it's not their fault. Mm-hmm. You get me? I'm going to be angry at whoever did me wrong, but then I'm going to change this because I shouldn't take out my frustration on others. Like, whatever it is, we need to learn to lead ourselves if we're going to be effective for the kingdom, which is what this is all about, right?
Exactly.
And so I think that's been a part for me. I think there came a point last year where I just stopped looking at tests and blessings. Like, they're all happening at the same time.
True. True. Yeah.
Like, it's all happening at the same time. And if we don't learn to, part of the problem with black and white is that we miss the duality of things. Mm-hmm. And most of our life is duality. Most of our life is we're celebrating one thing and mourning the other.
Yeah.
And sometimes,
like you said, it can be at the same time. And God is speaking. I love what you said earlier, that God, we're not worshiping the pain. We're not worshiping the joy. Neither one of those are the actual teacher, that God is using whatever it is, and he's the one that should be focusing on. But I love this conversation so much. I wish we could keep on going for hours and hours, that, but we're going to have to make it to part 3 very soon to make sure that we get you either or. By the way, I'll go ahead and put the pressure on you publicly, because as I mentioned, we do have a membership that we do these conversations all the time. And it's like you said it earlier, and I wish we had got on recording, but you mentioned something about community. You said community is not optional.
It's not optional.
What we're
as
doing
artists
right now is creating this community. The people that are listening and watching are part of the community. But I would just encourage you, as Melissa is saying right now, is make sure that you're not going through this alone, or whatever you need to do. If you need to connect with our community, if you need to connect with Melissa, make sure that you follow her. We're going to make sure all your links, by the way, whenever you're listening, by the time you get it, we'll make sure those links are there when your podcast is available, because I'm going to be listening. I'm going to be subscribed.
Thank you.
And
it's going to be, well, one of the things that I'm having trouble with, and you can help me, and we could do this either on recording or off recording.
Yeah, sure.
I'm a bilingual person and I'm here now. So it's like, one of the struggles that I've had is like, what do I name this thing when it's bilingual?
Yes.
Because there's going to be episodes in Spanish, there's going to be episodes in English. And what I'll probably do, and this is the other part, is some of the episodes are going to be reflections of just me. And then some of it is, and it's accompanied with a YouTube channel. Some of it is going to be interviews with people that I love. And I'm also going to be very selfish and just call on people that I want to learn from you. So I'm just going to bring you in.
The beauty of literally, I've said for years that the Garden Gigs is literally free coaching for me. I've got a chance to talk to people like you and other people that have so much expertise. And I've learned so much. And this is the other selfish part, some of my best business contacts, I'm part of an app now because of podcasting.
Let's go.
Like, these are the things that people don't realize, even in terms of, again, the portfolio lifestyle, right? It's not just one size fits all. It can be partly working from home. It can be partly working for a job. It can partly be self-entrepreneurship. And it can be partly, hey, build somebody else's vision, be the CEO, be the whatever. But it's all God using it. And that's what I love about your life, and how, again, you might not use the word eloquent. I'll use it eloquent, because I feel like just the ability to share what's actually going on in your life and not be ashamed. You know, the Bible says we're not be ashamed of the gospel, and we shouldn't be ashamed of our testimony either. So for you to share today, honestly, just open. I think someone's going to respond eventually and say, thank you, because I didn't know how to share this. And now they have the confidence to. So just tell them quickly before we wrap up. I know the links are in the show notes, but just tell them how can they stay in touch with you. We'll add everything else that's added, after the recording. But let them know how they can reach you right now.
So right now you can find me on Instagram as Hola, HOLA. It's Melly. Hello, welcome to my bilingual, almost trilingual life.
Okay, come on.
Hola, it's Melly on Instagram, and then melvargas.com. What I'll probably do is have it linked to the Substack so you can go straight there. But
perfect.
If I give you all the links, it'll be like, what? So melvargas.com.
Yeah, we'll let them go down the rabbit trail. You always get them to one place and then let them go down the breadcrumbs. But this has been amazing. God bless you, my sister. I'm so glad we got to reconnect. And I'm super happy to see that God is continuing to use you. We can't wait to see your next chapter.
Thank you. It was great, and it was a pleasure to be here.
My friend, thank you for watching this episode. If that blessed you, you got to make sure that you stay connected with this community and this channel so that you can get more where that came from. We're sharing great interviews, tactics, strategies, mindsets, lifestyle choices, everything that's going to help you become a totally confident creative. And don't miss an episode of the God and Gig Show. If you are staying connected to our channel, you'll be able to find us anytime we release new episodes. And you can check out some of our archives of almost 200 episodes now that we've shared over the last few years. Make sure you check out one of the suggestions right now because it's probably perfect for you to continue to develop as a creative. And continue to stay connected with us because we're here to help you become the creative that God created you to be. We'll see you in the next episode.